Hey, it's time for our workplace feature right now, and we're zooming into a case that took place in South Africa, and it was before the Labour Court in South Africa, and it's an interesting one. It's titled Buthelezi versus IEL Mining Services Limited and others, and at the heart of this, there was Mr. Buthelezi who was dismissed for using vulgar language during a workplace safety meeting, and what the arbitrator of this case found that the dismissal was fair. However, although the procedure was flawed, it was okay for him to get dismissed, and he although was awarded compensation for the procedurally flawed manner in which he was dismissed. However, he doesn't have a job after that. We're going to be speaking about how we speak to one another in the workplace, especially when we get very comfortable in a workplace where we know one another. How do we think about our speech as conduct? South African courts have consistently held that speech which impairs dignity, incites harm, or disrupts workplace harmony may justify disciplinary action, even dismissal. That includes the fact that we need to set clear boundaries around speech and conduct in our workplaces because of this. But employees also still have a voice, but how you raise your voice is very important. And should we also raise concerns around policies and who is the one who should advocate to change? And something as fluid as speech. Yeah, it's a difficult one. We discuss where is the line between freedom of speech versus company culture. Advocate Tertius Wessels join us on the line, Managing Director at Strata-g Labour Solutions. Tertius, welcome on the line. Thank you for joining us here on Channel Africa.
Good day, Benjamin, and thank you for the opportunity. Great to be part of the show.
You know, we get so comfortable in the workplace, right? And especially when maybe you work in a small working environment or you work in a department where you know everyone. It's so easy to get comfortable with our speech because we also don't think speech is something that can be legally held accountable for, Advocate.
100% correct. I couldn't agree with you more. You know, we often forget that the workplace is an environment that is filled with different people, different personalities, people with different backgrounds, experiences, views, and opinions. And often we would relate with certain people in the workplace, and we become quite comfortable in as far as the use of our language is concerned. Until one day when somebody new joins the organization and overhears something and all of a sudden takes offense against what we've said. And we all of a sudden don't understand why we are in hot water, so to speak. Or you may find that, you and I speak in a certain manner and all of a sudden we find ourselves in a more formal environment. And as opposed to checking our tone and our language, we kind of carry on speaking in that manner. And just because of the setting, it now is seen in a more serious light and seen as an act of misconduct. So yes, it is important for us to be mindful of the manner in which we engage with one another.
I mean, how you confront this in a culture whereby, it's high pressure and using foul language is part of survival or dealing with stress, then the lines are very blurred there.
Yeah, I can't tell you how often do I hear the excuse that I wasn't swearing at you, I was swearing at the situation.
Yeah.
Because of the pressures that we're under on a day-to-day basis. But the reality is that as employees, we have a duty and we have a responsibility to be respectful, and that is towards each other, superiors, subordinates, clients, suppliers, members of the public. And the pressures we experience on a day-to-day basis is never really an excuse for us to use foul or vulgar language or to make comments or remarks that infringe on the dignity of others. And it becomes there's a very fine line in as far as what is acceptable and not acceptable. But I think one thing that we all agree on is that workplaces are different in nature. And yes, sometimes what is acceptable in one place is not necessarily acceptable in another. But the overreaching principle is that we do need to be respectful, and then sometimes that just means not using certain languages. But that we often will also see is guided
Yeah.
by a company's policies and processes. I've yet to see a company policy that condones the use of vulgar language.
Mm. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about that in depth, because it's hard to prove what someone has said, for instance, because it's an area where someone can just refuse and say, no, I didn't say that. From a legal aspect, how do you confront these kind of disputes?
Yeah, the he said, she said kind of scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
And very often it is the reality is somewhere between the two. There is the truth. And that truth can be uncovered through proper investigation. And often think that employers neglect doing a proper investigation. We
Yeah.
hear about an incident and we're quick to issue a notice to attend a disciplinary hearing and go through the process. But we didn't even stop to think, listen, let me go and find out. Maybe somebody did overhear the argument that took place or the conversation. Or did I even consider subjecting the two parties potentially to polygraph
Oh,
examinations
wow. Okay.
just to ascertain whose version is more probably true? Yes, an employer can never solely rely on a polygraph examination results as conclusive proof. But when you have two conflicting versions, at least those results might point you into whose version is more probably true. So undergoing and taking steps to ensure proper investigation goes a long way in potentially uncovering what the truth is. And, obviously, if one does a proper questioning of the respective individuals, you'll also very quickly find out whose version is more probably true than the others.
Yeah, Advocate Tertius, we'll speak a little bit about this after the break, because what you're saying is very powerful. And it's something maybe we take for granted, because we think when we are in a friendly environment of work that it gives us permission to be ourselves. And it's usually the excuse that many people use. I was just being myself, These people know me. I am like this. I swear sometimes. It's just part of my bad habit that I have. And I apologize for this. I'm sorry that I did this. But to a large extent, also, we have got those cultural things that we probably do, that maybe we'd speak to people of a different sex in a way that's derogatory, and maybe we're not aware because it's something that is inbred in us. It's the way that we have been brought up, maybe not in a healthy way to really see the gender issues that are nuanced in the work environment. How do you confront those things that are more personalized? And someone would say, yes, I did do this, but I'm not sure if I did something that was wrong. I don't see the wrong in it. And maybe it's a cultural thing that they're not really aware of because of maybe a blind sight that they might have in seeing these things. We'll continue with that question as we go to a break, Advocate, and I'd like us to approach that, because for some people it's really second nature to them to be in a particular way. How do you diffuse that, and how do you make sure that there are better corrective measures than punishment to deal with such cases? Or is punishment the only way you can deal with this issue? We'll take a break and continue our In The Cubicle feature.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix. Ili kuchukua muda gani kuweza kukamilisha kazi hii?
Kwa kweli ndugu mtangazaji, tunapitia changamoto nyingi sana. Mpaka nikamilishe hii ngoma nilifanya takriban miezi miwili.
Na sababu ni nini?
Ni ukosefu wa management. Sababu tunajituma, ni kitu ambacho kiko ndani ya moyo wetu, na kosa ule atakaye kusaidia, lakini kitu kama kiko ndani ya roho hawezi kata tamaa. Ndio sababu tunanishinda sana.
Na wimbo wenyewe unaenda kwa jina gani?
Wimbo unaitwa Ringa.
Ringa, ni ujumbe gani ulio ndani ya wimbo huo?
Naambia wakina dada wale wanaoachika na wengine kutaka kuachika waliokuwa ndani ya ndoa zao. Ila nikasema kwamba wangu Ringa, acha kuhangaika, usiwahi kutoka hapa, usitoke huko na mimi. Wenzako wanahangaika waliotoka ndani ya nyumba zao.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live 5 days a week.
Hey, Advocate Tertius Wessels is joining us today for our In The Cubicle feature, where we look at how to navigate the workplace. Advocate Wessels is a managing director at Strata-g Labour Solutions. We're speaking about freedom of speech versus company culture. And when you draw the line in what you say to your colleagues, what you say to your bosses, even in moments of frustration, even moments where you feel like, you are in the right, is there a way that you can cross the boundaries of what you are saying to your colleagues? Advocate Tertius, before the break, I was speaking about the fact that it's commonplace for some people to feel like this is part of me. I swear, I was just born like that. I was in an environment like that. Or maybe there are nuanced situations where you say something to a lady as a gentleman in the newsroom or in the workplace or in the field outside where you are working, and the lady is like, no, you can't speak to me like that, and you don't see anything wrong in what you've said because you have a different disposition when it comes to these cultural norms.
100%. And you know what? You can bring your personality to work, but not at the expense of others.
Okay.
Respect needs to be maintained. Freedom of expression, let's call it that, is not a license for abuse. So employees can't hide behind this argument that it's just how I speak or who I am. The workplace is an environment where, yes, everybody has their own style, has their own personality, but there are still rules. And those rules dictate that one has to be respectful and professional towards your colleagues and others. So you'll never find a situation where, just simply because this is who you are, entitles you to use speech that is vulgar, abusive, or undermines dignity. I've never seen a rule that even remotely suggests that. In every working environment that you go into, professionalism is a key consideration, and there is companies almost advance this whole thing about you have to be respectful in your communications, etc. So regardless of your habits, be they good, be they bad, it's never an excuse to treat somebody in a manner that's not respectful.
I've been using the newsroom as an example because we as journalists do sometimes tend to be foul in our language, and, it's just kind of a way of being at times. If there is a dominating foul language culture in a workplace, how do you address that as an employee or also as the employer?
I think the reality is you'll look very hard to find in the working environment where there isn't some swearing that's happening there. But what is important is education. Especially when you're dealing with a diverse group of people in the workplace. It is so important for employers to invest in training their employees, not only on their own policies that exist, but also on how your conduct or behavior towards different groups of people may potentially be considered offensive. a couple of years ago, we saw the introduction of new legislation, which was the Code of Good Practice on the prevention and elimination of harassment in the workplace. And that
Mm-hmm.
code kind of goes quite in depth in as far as identifying various forms of conduct and behavior that might be regarded as harassment or offensive, or that needs to be eliminated within the workplace. And I dare not even ask the question how many employers have acquainted themselves with that particular code, who have taken steps to actually educate themselves and their
Mm-hmm.
employees, and even do refreshers, training sessions, because it doesn't help you train a person once. This kind of needs to be a consistent thing that happens,
Yeah.
because people come and go in your workplace, and it's only through knowing and understanding what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, that we can correct our behavior. Because one of the comments that you made prior to the break was, is punishment the only way which we kind of deal with these issues? And I think it's very important to understand that discipline in the workplace should never be intended as a form of punishment.
Mm-hmm.
The idea behind disciplining individuals or employees for their misconduct is to correct behavior. And yes, sometimes one person does something wrong, they don't get the benefit of a final written warning. Dismissal is considered appropriate because it's a first offense. But the idea is, in those circumstances, not to punish the individual, but
Mm-hmm.
to make the greater group of employees understand what will we tolerate and what will we not tolerate, so that they can change their behavior accordingly.
Yeah. You know, what's the legal implication here if you've done something like this and it's really, really bad? What is the worst that can happen to you?
I mean, I think if you look at the Putelesi case,
Mm.
um, dismissal is what can happen to you. And we can't underestimate, we're sitting in a country where the unemployment figure keeps rising.
Yeah.
And it's tough. It's tough to find a job out there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you now have a dismissal as being the reason why you left your previous employer, your chances of finding alternative employment becomes slim. So, in circumstances like these, where you had offended somebody or said something that was disrespectful, as opposed to try and make excuses for your behavior, I think it's important for employees to own up to it, show remorse for their behavior, and show a willingness to change their behavior and to refrain from such conduct going forward. Not saying that that is going to be a solution. It's not going to, you know, change the employer's mind, but it can go a long way, as opposed to just trying to make it all okay. Because
Mm.
sometimes what we said is not okay, and it does impact on the dignity of others.
Well, we're going to leave it there. Very, very great warning that you're leaving us with there, Advocate Tertius. Where can we find more about Strata-g Labour Solutions?
On our website, www.strata, so that's STRATA hyphen G.co.za.
Well, thank you so much, Advocate. You've helped us in a very difficult subject matter, and thank you for helping us from a general perspective, but also giving us those legal implications. Well, that conversation takes us to 10:30 Central African Time. Figile Lingwati is standing by to give us our latest sports.